question number 14 on the Algebra 2 Common Core Regents from January 2017. And this is a sequence question. We have the 8th and 10th terms of a sequence are 64 and 100. If the sequence is either arithmetic or geometric, the 9th term cannot be what? So let's take a look. What we have is we have 7 terms beforehand, and the 8th term is 64. We don't know the 9th term, but we know the 10th term is 100. Let's first start with an arithmetic sequence. So if this is arithmetic, we would be adding d and then adding d again. So we could say confidently that 64 plus 2d is 100. Subtract the 64, 2d is 36, and then divide by 2, and d is 18. So if we add 18 now, we would get 82 here. So we definitely know that it can be 82. Now, if we remember from a geometric sequence, we can multiply by either a positive or a negative r, because if we multiply by r here and then here, we would multiply by it twice. And if it's negative, we would multiply by a negative number twice, returning to that same positive. So from that, we could probably gather that 3 and 2 are both okay in a geometric sequence because they yield the same result but negative. So my guess at this point would be that the answer is 1, because I cannot add negative 18 and then negative 18 and still get 100. It would be very difficult for me to get negative 82 from this sequence. But let's verify this by actually finding the r. So we still have 64 and we still have 100, but in the case of a geometric sequence, we would multiply by r and then multiply by r again. So then we could say that 64 times r, or times r squared, is 100. So we would divide both sides by 64. We would get r squared is 100 over 64. And I don't necessarily want to simplify this because they're both perfect squares. So if I square root this, I'm going to get 10 over 8, or 5 over 4. Now realize that when I square root this, it can be either positive or negative. So my r is either 5/4 or negative 5/4 in order to get to the 100. So let's multiply 64 times 5 over 4, and you can either do this in the calculator here or just do a simplification. 64 over 4 is 16 times 5, and that is 80. So 80 is definitely good. And as we mentioned before, well, if we take negative 5 over 4, then we would get negative 80. And then when we multiply it again, we would go back to the positive 100. So 80 or negative 80 would work just fine here. And the answer is negative 82, because there's no way that I could get an arithmetic sequence here to go from 64 to negative 82 to positive 100. We can get positive 82 by just splitting the difference into 2 and finding that d is 18. But there's no way for us to obtain negative 82, whereas in a geometric sequence, if we multiply by a negative twice, we're right back to the positive values.